What's going on, everybody? Jared Sandler here with you, getting ready for episode 36 of the Just a Sec podcast. I want to thank you for coming this far, even though it's not that far just yet, but simply clicking on the link, I really do appreciate it. And would certainly appreciate if you'd consider subscribing to the channel, liking, commenting, or maybe just passing this conversation along to a friend or friends or whomever you think might enjoy this conversation or other conversations, a part of the Just a Sec series. And I encourage you to check around the channel and see what other things, what other content pieces we try to bring you, not just covering baseball, not just interviews such as these, or try cover it all. And hopefully there's something on this channel for you or someone else to enjoy. I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. Chris Woodward is such an incredible individual. The values, the ideals, the way he thinks, he is a constant learner. And I think that's why he is such a perfect fit for the job he has as the manager of the Rangers, and someone the Rangers expect to usher them into their next wave of competitive baseball. And hopefully in this conversation, you get to know what makes Chris tick and why he is such a unique individual in some of these regards, not just as a baseball person, but as a human being. I've really enjoyed getting to know Chris. I'm so thankful to call him a friend, and was really excited to have this conversation with him, and I hope that you enjoy. So here we go, episode 36 of the Just a Sec podcast with Rangers manager Chris Woodward. All right, Woody, I ask a lot of people about their childhood, and the one thing I want to ask you, I know you were obviously very active athletically. How did sports impact you growing up, beyond just the ability to have fun and play these different games? In what ways did it impact you, maybe beyond just that?
I think, honestly, sports was kind of everything. I obviously took school very serious. I was a really good student, all the way through. But honestly, sports was my passion, man. And obviously baseball was probably the one I was most passionate. It's probably because I was the best at baseball. But basketball was probably my second. Golf, football, anything that was on, it was just, I was so involved in just following the sports, and, it honestly ruled my life. All my off time was pretty much dedicated to sports. Like I said, whatever sport was in season, we'd play wiffle ball every day. Those were honestly my fondest memories of my childhood. Just getting, a bunch of guys together. We'd ride our bikes over to the park. I still remember, as of probably 10 years ago, going back to the old elementary school that I lived by. I didn't even go to the school, but when we were in junior high, we used that as a wiffle ball field, in the summertime, and the tape mark of our strike zone was still there, which was, you could see it. They painted over it, they tried to, but the tape was still, the residue of the tape was still there. So it was just amazing to me to think, and I just brought back a ton of memories. And those were honestly my best memories as a child.
Did you have any special wiffle ball pitches?
I could pretty much throw anything. I was very astute with the wiffle ball nuts. See, we taped them up. We played with the traditional white, with the holes on one side. We definitely played that. We had a limit on how hard you could throw it, because if you throw it really hard, you can't even touch it, because we knew how to move it all around. But we also taped up our balls. With the white tape, kind of probably worked the best. It really stung though when it hit you. So my one of my best friends, he didn't have the command that I did, so he would hit me a lot. Him being right-handed, and he hit. So I would hit left-handed on purpose just so he wouldn't drill me. Because those balls, they run arm side quite a bit and up. I remember him hitting me in the face a few times, and I had welts all over my body. But I was pretty good at commanding the ball. So if I needed to throw that ball outside, I would start it way outside because the ball moves so much. But those are things they were. It actually trained us. We weren't really trying to train by any stretch of the imagination, but we were just trying to have fun. But it just taught us timing of hitting breaking balls and different speeds, and how to manipulate the ball and how to spin the ball. All those things, I feel like kids are, I'm having a hard time, the younger kids, just getting them to understand those things and have fun with the game in that regard, instead of just always practicing for their youth tournaments and, that's all they do. They only practice or play games. They don't really have this fun off time that kind of we had growing up.
When I would play games like wiffle ball or maybe baseball in I don't want to say non-competitive form, but not, for a team in an actual league in a game that somewhat mattered, I would always try and emulate Ken Griffey Jr.'s batting stance. And if I wanted to change it up, maybe Gary Sheffield with that violent bat jerk. Who were the guys you would try and emulate? Because I know you're a Cal Ripken guy, but he changed his batting stance every 3 days. So I guess it was really tough to emulate his batting stance. Who are the guys you would try to emulate?
Griffey was a good one. Yeah, absolutely. We actually used to play, our wiffle ball games where we'd have to choose a team. Typically, I was the Orioles because I was a big Ripken fan. But we would have, we knew the lineup. We knew all our guys. Whoever was in the lineup that day, we had to basically, write out our lineup. But we had to try to hit like them because we knew what they hit like. We saw a video of them. We saw what they looked like. We weren't allowed to hit like ourselves. We had to, Brady Anderson's hitting. I had to stand straight up, just like he did. So I kind of knew all the Oriole, the way they stood. So, obviously Ripken was, I definitely had to change pretty much every bat that I went up there because he changed his stance so often. But, the Sheffield, the Griffey was a good one. Actually, Griffey, from a left-handed standpoint, that was probably my favorite one. Obviously, it was the smoothest one. But it was the one, I'm not saying I could hit like Griffey, but with a wiffle ball bat in my hand, I could. And that was the one I had probably the most success with, from a wiffle ball standpoint.
A mutual friend of ours whose name rhymes with Schmeichel Schmung wanted me to be sure to ask you who would win in a matchup between Bishop Amat and Northview.
Northview, 100%. So, him being the sellout that he is, maybe Bishop Amat gave him a Mercedes or something. No offense to Bishop Amat. They had an amazing school, and they were obviously well regarded in football and basketball and baseball. But he was supposed to go to Northview, so we would have had it. We were ranked number 1. I'm just saying, our senior year. Going into the preseason, we didn't finish that way at the end of the season. Neither did they. So he can't hold his hat on that. But we were ranked number 1, and they were ranked number 2 to start our senior year. So regardless of wherever he went, didn't really matter. We were still number 1.
So he played at Amat with Gabe Alvarez, who baseball fans maybe don't know because his career didn't amount to maybe expectation, but he was a big deal. And then was Mike Lamb also on that high school team?
Yeah. I believe so, yes. I don't know exactly the time, but I do know. I played against Mike Lamb, when I was younger. We definitely played against each other. He was on a lot of the same teams that Michael Young was on. Gabe Alvarez was of the 3 of those guys. Obviously Michael Young was highly touted, very well known, but Gabe Alvarez was kind of the can't miss, I guess you'd say. He was bigger than everybody. He had more power than everybody. He had a cannon from shortstop. He reminds me of like maybe what Alex Rodriguez probably looked like in high school. That's that kind of talent. And it just, when he was on the field, you knew it. And, Michael Young was good, but he was, from a from a stature standpoint, he kind of looked like me. He just was better than everybody else. Michael was he was such a good athlete that, he stood out that way. But Gabe's, like, his presence, on the field, you're like, oh my God, that's Gabe Alvarez. Like, it was a big deal when you got to play against him.
All right, so you go and Michael also wanted to be sure that he let me know that the fact that you beat him to the big leagues is something that, he it's a chip on his shoulder. But, one of the things you've talked about your big league career is that you were constantly trying to earn your keep and you're constantly having to prove yourself. And you never got that, 5-year deal where you could go to camp knowing, hey, I'm the starter. I can go 1 for the month of March and I'm going to be the starting, whatever position. How did that experience? I'm sure there were negatives, obviously, but from a positive standpoint, how did that experience benefit you as a player and even now in your current role as a manager?
It helps a lot. It basically shaped, this game will shape and define you however you want it to. So, I think the resiliency of my career, I think that's probably what I'm, most proud of. Just I never quit, never gave up, and I couldn't. At some point when you start to have a family, you start having kids, It's no longer just about you. And I don't think I ever took that approach, where it was only about me. But you can't help it when you're on your own, or you're not married, or you're single. It is about you. So you tend to kind of insulate, and you're like, all right, this is just about me. But once you start having kids, and I think that just the battle of not knowing every day, I didn't love it. There's many times where I hated it because it's, your back's against the wall. You go into camp knowing that you have to make the team, and it wasn't until the end of my career where I didn't make the team a few times that it started to kind of weigh on me. Because I knew I had kids at home that you got to provide for them, and I think people look at professional athletes as all being under kind of one umbrella, where they're all overpaid and they're all this and that. It's like, for the most part, most guys, I'd say 90% of guys, have to grind through. And the thing about baseball that teaches you that you have to keep getting back up, man. The game's going to knock you down. You're not going to have everything figured out. The second you do something, you're going to get hurt, and that's something that I had. I had injuries, early in my career where it really kind of derailed my ability to play on an everyday basis. And that kind of, took its toll on me, mentally and physically. But, you just keep going, man. You just keep fighting, and you just keep learning and growing. And I will hit on the, I did make it to the big leagues before Michael. I thought that was a big deal for me. Honestly, I'm not. He obviously had a Hall of Fame, in my opinion, a Hall of Fame career, and I was nowhere near that. So I'm not, saying I was better than him in any way. But I was pretty proud of that because he, I guess people don't understand. Like when I was growing up, he was the best. He was what I kind of looked at as he was the bar. The bar was high. You know what I mean? Like that was it. And I knew him personally. Like we were friends. We went, junior high together. So to actually beat him to the big leagues was, for me was a big deal. For him, he didn't really care. He's like, listen, whatever. I'll win the batting title 2 years from now, and you're just going to be a backup player. So he obviously had a great career. And but yeah, I mean, it did mean something to me, personally, that I was able to accomplish that goal.
He did share this with me, and I don't know if he shared this with you before. And for people listening, I mean, I think your relationship with him is really neat, and there are competitive elements to it, but the support you guys have for one another is really special. But one thing he said was when he joined the Blue Jays organization, he saw every middle infielder as competition except for you, not because he didn't value your abilities. He said because he was so proud of the player that you had become, and that he would tell every instructor he could, yeah, I know that guy. Like that's like, he's my friend. I know him. And I just thought that was really cool. And I don't know if he's ever shared that with you or not, but I figured I'd share that with you in the event he hadn't. That, it's not that he didn't think that you were good enough to be worthy of competition, but I think the relationship and the pride he had in his relationship with you kind of overwhelmed whatever competitiveness he would have otherwise directed towards you.
Yeah, it does mean a lot. I think, Michael and I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful that, our paths, connected again, because, we do share a bond of a childhood that, in the same area, kind of the same group of people, very similar, upbringing. It's meaningful for me just because it's that part of my life. I don't really have anybody else that was there, that was witness to that. So, anything we share, but for him to say those things, he has mentioned that to me over the last couple of years, where, he said, when I got into the Blue Jays organization, he saw that I was having an impact. Now, I didn't look at it that way because I was just trying to, I was just honestly trying to keep the uniform on. But for him to say that, he felt there was, people kind of looked up to me and, in the organization, and that the way I kind of went about my business was well known, that meant more to me than anything I'll ever do on the field. So he has shared those sentiments with me, and I really appreciate it because it means a ton, obviously, coming from him.
Now, you mentioned Cal Ripken earlier, and previously you've shared a fun story about your first interaction with Cal Ripken, the guy that you absolutely admired. I know you wore his jersey number when that opportunity was available. What was that first interaction with Cal Ripken like? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in the middle of a game between the Blue Jays and the Orioles.
Yeah, and it was really kind of one-sided because I was so terrified to even speak a word to him. This is 2 years into my career in the big leagues where I was terrified to say anything to him because I wasn't embarrassed that I was a big fan. I just didn't know what to say. Like you just kind of a little bit in awe, but also it's awkward. It's awkward to tell another man like I worship you, man. I idolize you. Like you don't understand. I used to wake up in the morning like everything. I used to defend you to all my friends, to everybody, in California. Nobody was an Oriole fan but me. So, I'd go to war for this guy without ever having met him or know him personally. So, to see him in a game and for him to actually tell me, "Hey, Woody, how's it going, man?" in the middle of a game, I don't even know if I responded. I can't even remember. I think I said, "Hey, Cal," that was about it. But, for him to actually utter those words, those syllables out of his mouth and say my name, and then to call me Woody on top of that, I remember going to sleep that night, not being able to sleep because I couldn't believe it. I mean, I literally couldn't believe that he actually, spoke to me and knew who I was. I had no idea he actually knew that I was on the Blue Jays, but for him to call me Woody, was beyond anything I could ever have imagined.
Now, I know towards the end of your career, you spent, I believe, a spring training with the Yankees and got to interact with Derek Jeter and maybe spend a little bit of time with him. What was that like? What were your takeaways from time spent with Jeter?
Yeah, it was kind of cool because he lived in Tampa, and I was living in Palm Harbor at the time. So we would go to the field before spring training started. I started going to the field 2 or 3 weeks early. I asked the trainer if I could go over to the complex and hit just to get to know the coaches, and so he was there, and so I got to spend a little bit of personal time with him, and we had played against each other quite a bit through my first 6 or 7 years, and so we knew each other but didn't really know each other. So it was really cool to get to just see how he interacts, and I see why he is beloved. You get to see very quickly. You hang around him, you talk to him. He treats everybody, very, very personable. Very into it. He makes everybody kind of feel like they're important. Doesn't disregard anybody. If he walks by a security guard, he knows their name. He gives them a moment. And it's brief, but it makes people feel like he truly cares about them. And just you see that over and over. There's nothing. It wasn't an act. It was very genuine. It was, there was a humble, belief inside of him that he was grateful for every day you can feel. But when he got a uniform on, man, and he got a bat in his hand or glove on, he's pretty confident. Obviously, a great player. But you could just see that the humble beginnings and the roots. Very, very genuine person, and to see that on a daily basis, I've seen superstars, and there's always this air of I'm better than everybody, and you just never felt that with Derek, and that was something that stood out to me, and it's an amazing quality to have. It's pretty rare in an elite athlete or a superstar athlete, kind of like that's put on a pedestal like that, well-deserved pedestal, but it's put on a pedestal, and they can start to take themselves a little bit too serious at times, and he never did that.
All right, Woody, you've dealt with some personal adversity, not going 0 for 4 and being in the middle of a slump, but losing your dad at a young age, and I know within your family with your wife Erin, you've talked about the adoption of your son Mason and some of the challenges that led to that, and obviously that's never an easy process. I'm just curious, what is your approach to dealing with that level of adversity, and how have you refined that over the years, and how you approach challenges? Again, not being in a slump and not making an error and feeling like you cost your team the game, but stuff that's maybe a level or two above that in terms of gravity.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big philosophical question, for all of us. How do we handle adversity? How do we handle things that are going to happen? And they're going to happen. Sometimes life isn't fair. And I tried to look at, early on in my life, I kind of was able to kind of roll with punches at times. I didn't really get too high and low as far as, how to handle things. But, I've always tried to find the positive in everything. And there's not a whole lot of positive in a few of those situations. So, I tried not to point fingers and say, why me, or anything like that. and to try to look at, okay, how do I get through this? How do we get through this? I mean, whether it was, obviously my immediate family, with, my mom and my sisters, how do we do that? How do we get through that? And I think that's, those are questions that we have to ask all the time. And I think we all grow as people in how to deal with those things. And now I'm teaching my kids, how to deal with certain things that happen to them, whether it's heartache or whatever they're having to go through. Hopefully not at that level of grief, but move on. Honestly, like we have a limited time on this earth, and there's certain things that we need to do to maintain that we're grateful for every day we have, but also not forget. There hasn't been a day that I haven't forgot about things that my dad kind of helped me with, but I have moved on, obviously, and tried to take the positives that he left inside of me and move forward.
I think two of the things that stand out to me about you, really from our first interaction over the last couple years, you love teaching, and you genuinely care about impacting people. And I want to hit on those two things. I want to start with the teaching side of it. Who were some of your influences as a teacher that maybe have helped you shape your understanding of how to teach others, over your career, be it in sports or even outside of sports?
Yeah, I think I've had a lot. Honestly, there's been quite a few people. Honestly, with my parents, my mom took on a huge role. My parents did get divorced, when I was 12, 13. So my mom took on a huge role. She did a ton for me. She took me to every practice. She was always there for me. Taught me, good morals, how to be a good person, how to treat people right. So all those things are obviously from my parents, and mainly my mother, just because she was there so often. My high school coach, kind of took me under his wing, when I was 13, 14. That was kind of around the time my dad kind of, wasn't as present. So he definitely filled that role that I desperately needed. And then on through high school and then into pro ball, like he really helped me, be able to do that. And then, in my professional life, as a ball player, I've had some amazing coaches. I think, a guy like Brian Butterfield stands out. He went above and beyond not just from a baseball standpoint, but just a mentality, how to compete, how to prepare, those things. And then, just from life standpoint, like believe in who I am, man. Like believe what I am is good enough. And I think that was a huge one for me. I would have never got through all that if I hadn't had his leadership and his impact. But I think there's so many other guys. Jeff Crushell comes to mind, the strength coach that I had. We're still really dear friends up to now. He has a huge impact on me, just mentality-wise, learning, growing. Always positive. So I've had these people, and I try to tell younger people when I'm trying to impact them or trying to provide now in an organization full of impact people, is that if you do the right things and you put yourself out there and you're working your butt off and you're wanting to learn, wanting to grow, and you're trying to be as impactful as you can, you're going to attract those people. And I think that's what's always kind of stood out to me, is because there's always been somebody there for me. And some people don't have those people in their lives, but I feel like if you do the right things and you seek out those kind of people, those people will be attracted to you, and that's what I'm all about in this organization. And I'm lucky that I'm in this organization because we have a lot of like-minded people, and impact is everything. Impact is like, what are you living for if you're not impacting people? In my opinion, it's great to be successful personally, but it's more than that. It's definitely more than that for me, and I know a lot of the best people in the world that I know or don't know personally, but I see the impact they're having. That's what they believe as well. So I'm never going to stop that as long as I live, and I know my wife and my kids feel the same way, and we're trying to make as much impact as we can, with every day.
I think one of the things that jumps out is that you also have a passion to learn. And even at your level and what you've accomplished, it doesn't matter who you're speaking to. There's always a part of you that's open to the possibility that this person or this event is going to teach you something. And so I guess I'm curious, just not even necessarily from a baseball standpoint, because I think we will focus in on that in a second, but just in general, how do you go about learning? What is your mindset and approach to learning in general?
Yeah, I think first of all you got to be open. The biggest thing is you got to be open to learn. You got to want to learn. And I think some of the best advice I've ever been given is every single person that you come in contact with can teach you something. If you look at through that lens, you'd be surprised how many things you may have missed over the years, or how much you may miss from somebody who you disregard because you think, they're just whatever. Even the lowest of the people you think, okay, that guy can't impact me, there's no way. Find out, get to know. I mean, everybody's in their own situation. Now, there's some people that will frustrate you because they don't operate the way you feel like, or they don't live the way you feel like, or their views or their whatever their beliefs are, that they don't align with yours. That's fine, but why? What makes them different? And it's amazing how much you can learn from every individual. And in turn, once they feel that you've accepted some of them, they typically tend to do the same for you. So, that's where you get the dialogue back and forth, and you can see so much growth and so much learning from each other. I think that's something that most people nowadays, and you just see it. It breaks my heart to see, our country, or just in general, like people just disregarding people, because they believe in that they're the enemy, and it's unfortunate because we could learn so much from both sides, of differing views. Some of my best friends have differing viewpoints on certain things, in our lives, in philosophically speaking or politically speaking, whatever. But the beauty of that is that they have a belief. There's a reason why. So once I learned that, okay, that makes a little more sense. Maybe it's their upbringing or their background or whatever it may be. I just think we cannot disregard anybody. And it's amazing how much you do learn from people when you just stay open. And if you have the desire to learn, there's a lot that people can teach you.
Have you always been so curious and open-minded, or were there experiences that kind of pushed you down that path?
I think it's just honest experience. I've always been open. I've always been very, very curious as a young kid. And it brings me back to my dad. My dad was very, very curious and very scientific-minded. So I asked him a ton of questions. I probably drove him nuts when I was a kid. But he was always like, why, Dad? Why, Dad? Why is this? Why is that? And I think, that was outside of sports, right? That was just, why is the sky blue? Like, what are the stars? Like, what is it? Why? And so I just kept going deeper and deeper, and basically into as many rabbit holes as I could find myself, because I was curious. My mind was just like, this has to make sense to me, or otherwise I'm going to go nuts. Like, I don't understand. I'm not just going to accept this. I have to find out why. And so that kind of, mentality, it drives you. It makes you a little bit insane at times, because until you find an answer, you go nuts, right? You just have to keep trying. Why can't I figure this out? Why can't I figure this out? And so when that kind of, obviously, same mentality in sports, I always had to be the best at everything, and not that I was, but I just always had to figure things out when it came to sports. So, I'd sit there and shoot till 4 a.m. Okay, why is my shot going right? Or why can't I shoot it straight every time? So I just sit there and shoot. So it was that kind of relentless, almost like OCD kind of mentality where it's just like, I got to keep going. And so when you learn that way, typically you're obsessed with trying to learn more. And it's a beautiful thing when your mind starts expanding and you start realizing the more you know, and everybody says this, the more you know, the more like you realize you don't know. And so it becomes like this giant world of like, man, it's a little bit overwhelming at first. And I think that's why a lot of people get scared of kind of pushing themselves to learn more about things, because they realize the more they do start to know about it, they're just scratching the surface on what other people may know. And that's, like I said, it's a little bit overwhelming. Sometimes it gets in the way of progress for some people because they get scared. But I've always said, no, push through that. If you push through that, it's amazing what you find on the other side. And you kind of find yourself in the process, right? You find out what you truly believe and why you believe it. And that's a beautiful thing, as opposed to just following, something that you heard or read. You actually have some real understanding of the subject.
Woody, you are a part of a game that is evolving at, it seems like, record speed with technology and information, stuff that certainly wasn't around throughout the entirety of your playing career, and heck, things that weren't necessarily even around when you started coaching. I think, I've heard from you hear from a lot of people that adapting, or the ability to adapt, is so huge in any role. How have you been able to adapt to the way this game has changed and been able to incorporate it now in what you're trying to do with the team and the players in this organization?
I think I'm lucky. I'm lucky that my career ended the way, a lot of people may say, man, I wish I played now. I'm glad I played when I played, because now, I'm a much better coach than I ever was a player, I feel like. I think that's where my strength really, truly lies. But I think, the experiences that I had to go through as a player, all the ups and downs, all the just getting kicked down, beat down, and getting through it, it allows me to relate better, as opposed, to the guy who maybe didn't go through all that stuff, and now the game has changed, and, to have the knowledge base, I guess, of all these things that we're doing now, if I didn't have the relatability to the players, it wouldn't come across the same. So, I'm looking through this lens and saying, listen, I'm trying everything we can to figure out the way to make you the best player possible. And when players understand that, when they feel that, there's not much they can say back to dispute it, because we are now in a position where, as an organization, I'm really proud of it, that we can provide everything possible for a player to improve on every front. There isn't anything that we can't help them with. And that to me, and then I know the players feel the same way. That's exciting. That's exciting when a player feels like, okay, whether it's my technique or whether it's my physical ability, my mobility, or whatever it may be, my cardio, anything, my mental ability, can I improve? And they have an idea of how to, not only diagnose me, but provide me a prescription or a blueprint to say, here's your pathway for success. I'm obsessed with that, right? I'm obsessed with that for all of our guys. And I get so much satisfaction to see how hard our staff works and our organization works to provide these things for these players, and then to see the players buy in, and then to see them improve. That's like the ultimate for me as a leader and as a teacher and like you said, an impact person. Like, if we can impact them that way, we're making better people in the process as well. So that is, beyond anything that I could ever do as a player. But to have the I guess the experiences that I had to go through, where I didn't maybe have all these things, now I can provide some real feedback to these guys and say, listen, this stuff would have helped me, in my own personal, experiences. This would have been a huge help for me, and maybe could have, whatever, done something in my career. And I want to keep you guys from following that same path. Maybe you guys go on a better path where you can obviously, help us win a bunch of games and make a bunch of money, and we'll be champions because of it. And I think the players really they really want to believe in something like that.
All right, Woody, I know we've touched on some of this stuff, but I definitely want to make sure I ask you this question directly in case there's something maybe that hasn't come up. But what are your core values of leadership? You're in a position where you are responsible for leading a number of men and women, and the feedback so far through 2 years is that this is something you do really well. What is important to you when you go about your business every day as a leader?
We could talk for about 5 hours about this one, but I think the biggest thing is to care. I think that's the biggest thing. For me, that's probably the number one. Make everybody here feel valued, because they are valued. I think that's probably number one for me in leadership. If you lead from that in that way, put others ahead of yourself. I think that's. I say it all the time to our staff. From a leadership standpoint, I talk to our players about this, especially our leadership players. You can't have an ego. The ego gets in the way, right? You take yourself too serious. I don't take myself that serious. I just take myself serious in regard to how much I can impact the organization in a positive way. Get to move this organization forward. I wouldn't say I'm, overly demanding, but I'm very demanding in what I expect out of everybody here. I expect everybody to be respectful. first of all. Like, that's probably my non-negotiable number one is you have to be respectful. Like, we're all working hard here. Nobody's going to disrespect anybody else. We all got to work together, right? So anybody who's disrespecting anybody else, there's no we can't tolerate that. But I do want people to give their opinion. They should feel comfortable to give their opinion. You know what I mean? So if you can lead in that way. Now, I mean, we can talk, like I said, for hours about so many other things from a leadership standpoint. You know, obviously being positive every day. I don't preach being positive just to, you know, to create a cozy environment so people are comfortable. I just believe it's healthier, right? Your brain works better, your body works better. You know, athletes function better when they have a positive state of mind. Not necessarily like a smile on their face, but just a positive, optimistic outlook to the future. And that keeps people growing, that keeps people learning, that keeps people wanting to come back. If you're not enjoying or getting some fulfillment or satisfaction out of your job every day, what the hell are you doing it for? You know what I mean? And I love my job. I love coming to the field every day. I love talking to our guys. I don't get tired of it. And I think that that's something from a leadership standpoint. Like, I want to, you know, carry on to the next guy. So whoever either takes my job or, you know, works within the organization, they're doing the same thing. They're every day. You know, this is a grind of a day every day. But if you don't enjoy it, man, what's the point of doing it? Find something else to do. And you know, our game is such a beautiful game that, you know, you're going to get your butt kicked sometimes. You know, it's going to happen. I'm not going to make the right decision every day. Our players are going to punch out. They're going to pop up. They're going to, you know, have bad games. But the fact that I'm going to be there, standing there the next day, looking them in the eye and saying, hey, we got this. We're going to come back and do it again tomorrow, and we're going to love every minute of it. That, you know, keeps those guys going forward. And our staff is amazing at that. You know, and I obviously try to lead from the top down in that way. But honestly, putting everybody ahead of myself, you know, and being humble in this job, I think sets the tone, you know, and provides that kind of egoless, you know, top down, and it just shows the rest of the guys, like, you don't have to have an ego about this. You don't have to take yourself so serious. I think that's really important.
And I guess that's probably really relevant with the next question I want to ask. You know, everything's all fine and peachy until something goes wrong, and I think that in any form of leadership, how you handle conflict or that first sign of you know, something that's not just all sunshine and roses is really important. And I'm sure there were things that we have no idea about before your first game managing, but one thing that always I think will stand out is your first game managing against the Cubs. They have a lefty starting, and Shin-Soo Choo, who's a lefty, was not in the starting lineup. And it's something that impacted him in a way that maybe you didn't realize, and you were very quick to, have a private conversation with him and then come out publicly and say, hey, you know, I messed that up. And I just thought that was such an important moment, because someone in a leadership position who's not able to admit when they mess up, and I certainly don't have the expertise and knowledge to know whether you did or didn't mess up or whether that was the right or wrong thing to do, but the fact that you came out and addressed it immediately and you know, accepted that, it's probably easy for Joe Torre to do because he's won several World Series and you know, has the track record. But this is your first game as a big league manager. I was just always really impressed by that, and I don't know what led to that. Is that, you know, how important is that, I guess, is maybe the best way to ask this. How important is the ability, and you touched on it with no ego, having no ego, but the ability to deal with conflict in your role or really any leadership role?
Yeah, it's a crucial part of it, right? And I think from a leadership standpoint, you know, leaders have to be accountable. If you're, you know, that's one thing you know, every, you know, the cliche of leadership, right? You got to keep these guys accountable. But if you're not holding yourself accountable and you're not willing to admit when you made a mistake to the group, then you're not setting the example for the rest of the guys. And listen, I could easily in my position just rule with an iron fist and say, I don't care if I make a mistake. Whatever I say goes, so it doesn't matter. So you eliminate yourself from that accountability, you know, train. I don't believe in that. I didn't do that on opening day with any intention to show that I'm accountable or anything like that. I just truly felt like after I, dealt with the situation, and Chew and I had, a week long of conversations, which, I would do it differently if I had to do it again. But I'm really grateful for the time that I got to spend with Chew, because we had a week of not pleasant in the beginning conversations to, maybe 3 or 4 days of very deep conversations where I got to know him on a much more personal level and understand the inner psyche of Shin-Soo Choo, which, I was, in awe of who this guy is after that. And, we had a very, very powerful, mutual respect for one another after that. And so only me screwing up would that have occurred. Really, maybe a halfway into the season or a year into the season, at the end of the season, maybe I would have gained that knowledge of who he really is. But it forced me to in the beginning. So I'm grateful for that, but I would definitely do it different if I had to do it over again. I didn't realize, shame on me for not knowing him. And listen, I get it. There's a thousand reasons why I shouldn't have known. My first year, I don't have time to, dig into the psyche of, 50 guys in spring training and then 25 guys to start the season. I try as best I can, but, I owed it to him to maybe dig a little deeper to see, okay, if I sat him on opening day, what that would mean to him and his culture and his family. And, now that I look back, I'm like, I screwed it up. I should have absolutely started. Who cares about the lefty? And I've always said this, and, there was a few things that happened throughout my career as a player and then as a coach that sometimes the situation is bigger than, what the numbers might say, or, what the right thing to do sometimes has nothing to do with left, right, or anything, from an analytical or a statistical standpoint. And we got to be mindful of those situations. And, I've always prided myself on that. So when I didn't make that decision, I had to say, you know what? I screwed it up. I shouldn't have done that. He should have absolutely been starting opening day. And that would have meant Hunter Pence didn't start. So, it was not an easy decision either way. I made a decision. I told him exactly what I felt and why I made that decision. He understood that, but he still didn't obviously agree. But he did respect me for having an opinion. I'm not going to make a decision without fully thinking it through. And, he appreciated my honesty about the whole situation. But at the end of the day, we're way closer because of it.
Last thing, Woody, one thing that has really stood out is how committed you are to being a dad and a husband, despite the fact that your job is incredibly demanding, whether that's, making the schlep every day in spring training to your home in Chandler, which puts you on the road for, multiple hours a day with the commute, or, doing everything you can to just be involved in your son Grady's baseball, or to hang out with your middle son Mason and obviously your daughter Sophie, and just being involved in what she's doing. If you don't mind, I'd love to ask about Mason. You guys, you and your wife Erin, adopted Mason. I know that those experiences are not always the easiest. They're not necessarily seamless. What was your experience like in adopting Mason, and maybe what did you take away from that? To second that, my family's everything. That's always going to be number one. As much as I love, my job, and, I'm very passionate about it, and I'll always, whatever I'm doing, I'm always going to give, everything I have. But my family's number one. They're so far above everything else that, nothing will stop that. And as far as, obviously my kids, my wife and I, Erin and I are very passionate about how we lead our kids. I lead our kids the same way I lead our players. It's very similar. We're trying to create the best possible version of themselves. Not caring if they ever become a superstar athlete or a famous musician. That's not, I want these to be the most impactful versions of themselves, and be proud of themselves. I think that's a huge thing. But as far as Mason goes, if you didn't, I'm not the most religious. I'm definitely, Mason changed my opinion in a lot of ways spiritually, just because I think my wife changed my opinion in a lot of ways when we first met. And, the way we were able to, Mason was
brought into our lives was, I mean, it's hard to imagine any other way, but something divine, honestly. We had a hard time, getting pregnant. We had Sophie. She was 4 or 5. My wife was going through some tough. She had a really bad miscarriage, and then a few others after that, and it was just a really difficult time for her. So she always told me, she's like, I want to adopt. And so we started the process, and the way we ended up getting Mason, was, like I said, it was the way things lined up. There was no other way that those things, it wasn't a coincidence. And listen, I'm the most, like I said, curious and skeptical when it comes to, divine intervention or something like that. I think things just happen most of the time because of coincidence. But this one, proved to me that, okay, there's something bigger at work here. But he's an awesome kid, man. He's, he wants to be a chef, plays the piano, does all the things that I probably didn't do, and I love every minute of it. Honestly, he's our cultured one. He brings culture into the family. He does things that are different than the other two, which we love. And he's got a passion for different things. He doesn't love sports, which I'm totally fine with. He'll sit and watch it with me every once in a while, but I'm fine with that. Honestly, I told him one day, like, he's trying to play baseball, and he's like, Dad, I just don't love it. And I'm like, then don't play. Well, I don't want to let you down. And it broke my heart because I'm like, he felt like he had to play because he didn't want to let me down. And I said, Mason, you follow your dreams, man. You follow your passion. I don't want you to follow something that you don't have a passion for. And so he did. And so, I think from that point on, he's really kind of followed his own passions, and, we're going to support them, to no end. Because I love that our kids are passionate about different things.
I mean, I can tell you, first of all, his Instagram food reviews are outstanding, and he's already a way better dresser than I am. So I think I could learn a thing or two from Mason.
Yeah, he's got some style, man. He likes nice things. He's motivated. That's the one thing he's good with. He's just so different than the other two. He's great at time management, which the other two are like kind of spazzes, and they just kind of do whatever. They're kind of living in the moment. He's like not afraid to map out his whole day. He's got his homework, and this off time, his ability to time manage has been amazing. Like through, it's a crisis. All the school went online and all that. He's like, well, I got to do this today, and then I got to do that tomorrow. And he maps out his whole week basically, and then he goes and does his own thing after that. So he's earned his time to kind of do whatever he wants in the off time.
There you go. That's my conversation with Rangers manager Chris Woodward. Hope you got to know Woody just a little bit, and I'm sure if you tuned in, this is a guy who you'd agree is super easy to root for. And so, hey, if you don't already root for Chris Woodward and the Rangers, you can start now. The season begins for the Rangers on Friday. You can follow along. But really appreciate Woody taking the time to share on his experiences from start to present day. Really a tremendous person, tremendous family, and again, super thankful of that conversation. If you enjoyed it, would really appreciate if you would subscribe to the channel, like, comment, or share this conversation with friends, family, whomever, Rangers fans, baseball fans, Dodgers fans, Mariners fans, Blue Jays fans. Woody played for a few different teams, or just, again, anyone. I'd really appreciate it. But thanks again for listening to episode 36 of the Just a Sec podcast. Back with you on Thursday for episode 37 with radio legend Howard Eskin. So I'm looking forward to that, but until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you in a sec.